They called her a witch. They called her a temptress. They called her a usurper. But Anne Boleyn was none of those things. She was something far greater. A woman whose ambition shook Europe, whose courage defied a king, and whose death carved a new path for England. This is the story of Anne Boleyn. Anne was born around 1501, daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a courtier with more ambition than power. She wasn't royal, not born for a crown, but her family saw her as a ladder to climb. As a young girl, she was sent abroad, to the shimmering courts of Burgundy, then France. She soaked up everything: languages, fashion, wit, poise. By the time she returned to England, Anne wasn't just another lady-in-waiting. She was sharp, she was magnetic, and she was unlike anyone at Henry's court. At first, it was her sister, Mary Boleyn, who caught the king's eye, his mistress for a time. But it was Anne who held his gaze. She was different. Where others melted at his touch, Anne held her ground. She told him flatly, "If you want me, it won't be as your mistress. It'll be as your queen." For Henry, it was a challenge. For Anne, it was survival. But there was one problem. Henry already had a wife, Queen Catherine of Aragon. For 20 years, Catherine had worn the crown, but she gave Henry only one surviving child, a daughter, Mary. Henry needed a son, and Anne seemed worth tearing the world apart for. He begged the Pope for an annulment. He claimed his marriage to Catherine was cursed, that God was punishing him, that Anne was his salvation. But Rome refused. Spain backed Catherine. The Pope held firm. So Henry snapped. He broke with Rome, declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. England was no longer Catholic. It was Henry's church now, and in 1533, he married Anne in secret. Soon after, she was crowned queen. Europe gasped. A king had defied the Pope for love. Anne seemed unstoppable. Young, elegant, brilliant. She carried herself like prophecy fulfilled. But power brings enemies. Catherine's allies called her a witch, a usurper, a curse. The nobles hated the rise of the Boleyn family, and Anne refused to fade. In September 1533, she gave birth. Henry rushed in, expecting a prince. It was a girl, Elizabeth. Henry's smile disappeared. Anne reassured him a son would come, but one miscarriage followed another. Each one eroding her grip on the king. Anne had given England a future queen, but Henry didn't see destiny. He saw failure. By 1536, his love curdled into bitterness, and Anne's enemies, led by Thomas Cromwell, moved in. They accused her of adultery with 5 men, including her own brother. The charges were absurd, but deadly. Anne was arrested, dragged to the Tower of London, put on trial. She stood tall, denied everything, but the verdict was set. Guilty. Treason. Henry had won her with defiance. Now he would destroy her with lies. 19th May 1536. Anne walked to the scaffold, dressed in grey. Her dark hair tucked beneath a hood. The French swordsman waited. Crowds held their breath. Anne spoke clearly, I die the king's faithful servant and God's first." She knelt, the blade rose, and in one clean motion, her head was gone. Anne had reigned for just 3 years, but her story was far from over. Her daughter, Elizabeth, was barely 3, but that child would rise as Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. She would rule 45 years, defeat the Spanish Armada, lead a golden age. Elizabeth was Anne's final triumph. Anne Boleyn was more than a queen. She was a spark, a split in the church, a shift in history. She lost her crown. She lost her life. But through Elizabeth, she gained immortality. History remembers her as scandalous, dangerous, tragic. But the truth is simple. Anne Boleyn changed England.